Welcome to 16 weeks of SAT, week 7. Now this week we're going to be covering decimal multiplication. Now decimal multiplication is I think, one of the more challenging aspects of the SATs in terms of a written strategy. The reason is that we've got a whole host of different things that we need to remember. It could be a short multiplication, it could be a long. And if it is a long multiplication, we're only going to get 1 mark for it as well. So decimal multiplication is all about understanding place value, setting the question out properly, and getting those marks as easy as possibly. And that's what this video is all about. I'm going to run you through exactly how to lay these questions out, how to approach short decimal multiplication and long decimal multiplication, but also some of the questions that we don't need to carry out a decimal multiplication for. Some where we're multiplying by things like 0.5, we just need a half, and I'll show you an example of that. And then other questions where we multiply by 10, 100 or 1,000, those questions also aren't needing us to do a written strategy to calculate the answer. We can just use our knowledge of place value to make the number 10, 100 or 1,000 times greater or smaller. So decimal multiplication is challenging, but it's also really, really straightforward once you use the strategies or the strategy that I'm going to show you in the following video. Again, everything that I'm going to cover in the video is outlined in Sats Like a Ninja, so get your hands on a copy on that. There's a link in the description below. But as usual, the video is going to cover some direct modelling from myself, showing you exactly what to do, some Sats questions examples, and finally some questions for you to have a go at yourself. So let's get stuck into it in this week's 16 weeks of Sats. So decimal multiplication. Now, as we said, decimal multiplication is quite probably a worrying topic for many of you, and most of it comes from not really understanding how to lay out the question, or sometimes even what the question's asking. And in the end, there's a few of these examples that I'm going to show you that don't really require a written strategy. They can be solved mentally. It's understanding what the question is asking. Now, essentially, with a lot of SATs questions that are decimal multiplication, let's look at the layout. We've got a decimal number here of 3.26 multiplied by 6. Now, in some instances, we want to be able to try and do this mentally, but I'm just going to show you the strategy that I would use if you needed to do it in a written sense. And it basically goes back to decimal, addition, subtraction, everything else with place value. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is notice that we've got, if I just highlight this, I'm just going to call them parts of the questions. So we've got the green part, we've got the red part. All right. And then we're going to lay them out. So the green part, ideally, we're going to make sure goes up here. All right. So it's that first row, the number that we are multiplying. So let's write that in. So we've got 3.26. Okay, and we're multiplying that by 6. Now, again, the key here, the only difference that from other problems is we've talked about the ones column. So essentially in this problem, this 3 is the 1 and this 6 is a 1 because these are decimals. But we wouldn't put the 6 here. We want the 6 in the more furthest right column, right? Just like every other sort of strategy that we've applied. So that would be multiplied by 6. So that's our red number. And again, this is just to differentiate between the two numbers that we're talking about. So that layout is pretty good. Now, the only thing that we really want to do now is then think about our place value in terms of the decimal. So the next tip is to then put the decimal in the answer ready. So we've got the decimal in the question, but the number that we're multiplying by, we don't need to put a decimal here because there isn't one, and then in the answer. So now when we start to multiply, everything's going to start dropping into the right columns for us. So let's have a go at this. So if we do the first one, let's use a different color. So 6 times 6 is 36. So we would put the 6 in, and we would carry the 3. Job done. Then we're going to do 6 times 2. So this where the numbers that we're multiplying go, the sums are just ending up automatically in the boxes that they need to be because we've laid the question out correctly. Now we're going to do 6 times 2, which is 12, add the 3 is 15. So again, we would put the 5 in, and obviously we're going to bridge across the decimal into the next column, the next working column. And then the final one is 6 times 3 is 18.
add the 1 is 19. So we're very simple. Carry the 1. There's nothing else to do, so that 1's just going to drop down. So it gets us to 19.56 really, really easily. And that's all because of this bit here. All right, so I'm just going to try and highlight that in something different. Let's go yellow. Is making this column is the key column. Is making sure that where the decimal is in the question, in this same column, we automatically put the decimal. Because what tends to happen is the decimals end up all over the place, and that's where most children go wrong. So if we can lay out the two decimals in the same column, then essentially column multiplication or decimal multiplication is very, very simple, because we just go through the same process as everything else. But because we've created a structure, a place value structure, everything's just going to fall into the right place where we need it. So again, here's another good example, 4.26 times 7. Now, again, this is a short multiplication because we're only multiplying by one number. We multiply by two numbers or two digits. That's going to be a long multiplication with our additional placeholder 0, but it's multiplied by one digit. So again, so as soon as I see this situation of, let's just get a highlighter up again, of a decimal number multiplied by a single digit number, I'm thinking, right, okay, is this an actual decimal multiplication question? Because if it's multiplied by 10 or 100, then that's not really, that's just place value, and we're going to move columns to the left too, make it 10 times bigger for 100. The other thing is, if it's multiplying by 0.5, then essentially all that question's asking us to do is to half the number. So there are some tricks out there a little bit. But this one, we can just go straight into laying it out. So again, I'll just remove that with a little bit of a rubber. Go back to the pencil. So 4.26, so we've got 4.26. So again, we've got our decimal, and I would just automatically put the decimal in already, and then we're multiplying by 7. So we're starting off, we'll go for green. We're starting off in this column. This is where we start. So this is where we align the numbers furthest to the right. Very, very simple. And again, it's all about the structure. And then, as I said before, with the yellow, we've got this nice column here of structure, which then creates essentially what is a ones column here, tens, hundreds, and so on. So we've created place value, and that's always what we want to try and achieve. So let's go back to doing the problem. So we're going to do 7 times 6, 7 times 2, 7 times 4. Very, very simple. So 7 times 6 is 42. So we're going to drop that 2 in, carry the 4. 7 times 2 now is 14. Add the 4 is 18. So we're going to pop that 8 in, carry the 1. And then we're going to do 7 times 4, which is 28. Add the 1 is 29. So we're going to put the 9 in, carry the 2. There's nothing else to do, so that 2 is going to drop down. So we end up with 29.82. Now, in the last question, I meant to mention this. There is a little sense check that goes with this, in that if we're looking at this number and all of a sudden, let's say you've got 298.2 or something like that, there's a sense check here in just working with the whole numbers. That if we just work with, I'll highlight in blue. So if we just work with 4 and 7, and we did 4 times 7, just in our heads, 4 times 7 is 28, then sense check, the answer should be around the 28 area. Obviously, we need to multiply 2.6 by 7 as well. But if we just think sense check, right, this should be around 28, because I'm multiplying 7 by 4. So if you've got 298.2, you can think, well, wait there, there's something wrong here. I've messed up. So there's always a little sense check by just working with, as I've said, the whole numbers. So we can just do 7 times 4 is 28. We've got 29.82. We must be pretty close. So that's always a good strategy to apply. So this is this is the next most common type of question that you'll get. And this really tends to, these ones, I'll do this one and another one. These ones tend to really throw everybody. And again, the reason being is if we notice, again, I'll highlight them. So we've got a decimal that we've spotted. We'll just highlight it here. And then the issue really is, as you've probably noticed from below, is that we're multiplying by a 2-digit number. So essentially, even though we're not going to get 2 marks for it, this is a long multiplication. So it's spotting this. So it's a decimal long multiplication. So again, if you're not confident with long multiplication, go back to last week's video on long multiplication and look at the strategy. But again, it's this sense of the place holding 0 is going to help us create. So there's a lot of place value in this. And I always talk about place value being so important. But again, if we don't lay this out correctly, we will get it wrong. Not because we're getting the numbers wrong or the calculations wrong, but just because we lay it out wrong, and then the place value will be wrong. So again, let's just go back to laying things out really, really simply. So again, if we just think about the decimal to start with, decimal's going to go in this row, and the number that we're multiplying, I'm just going to colour this bit off, and the number that we're multiplying by is going to go here. So we're always making sure that this column is aligned, okay? So it's the furthest right column, we haven't just got here and then a blank, all right? So this is all used up here especially. So we're going to have, I'll just get rid of that. We're going to have 0.6 times 24. Now again, this is where presentation and layout is key, because it's got really tight really quickly. So again, now, because we've placed the decimal here in this column, this is our decimal column. So this is now the tens, this is now the ones, this is now the tens, this is now the hundreds, and so on. So we've got to continue this through, and we can continue these all the way through in advance. So we've got, this is going to be a decimal, this is going to be decimal, and we know we're doing an addition at the end, so that is also going to be where the decimal is as well. Now, it seems a bit extreme, but what this has done here is created place value, all right, all across the question. So now we've done this, and it's a lot to remember, I appreciate, but now we've done this, everything that we do, if we do everything in the right order, is going to fall into place. So here, we're going to, again, just like a normal multiplication, we're going to do 4 times 6, 4 times 0 in this row. Then we're going to multiply by 20. So we need our place holding 0. Then we're going to do 20 times 6, 20 times 0. And that's it, because we've laid it out effectively. In fact, I'm just going to pop my place holding 0 in, because I know that that needs to go there, because I'll be multiplying by 10. And I'll drop back to that in a minute. So let's have a go. 4 times 6, remember, we're working just naturally in this row around the decimal. So 4 times 6 is 24. So we're going to put the 4 in, and we're going to carry the 2 into the next available column. Then we're going to do 4 times 0, which is 0, and then we're going to obviously add the 2. So that's 2 in total over here. So I've got 2.4. Now I'm multiplying this number, which essentially is a 20. So we've got our place holding 0 to represent the fact that we're multiplying by a 10. So we're then going to do 2 times 6, which is 12. So that's nice and easy. So we're going to put the 2 in, carry the 1, and then we're going to do 2 times 0, which again is nothing, add the 1. So again, very simply, all of these, although the layout is complicated, all of these multiplications are very simple. 4 times 0, 2 times 0, 2 times 6, 4 times 6. Very, very simple. And that leaves us with our addition. So we're going to do 4 times 0, 4 add 0, put a little add. 4 add 0 is 4, 2 add 2 is 4, and the 1, there's nothing to add to it, so that's just going to drop down. So our answer is 14.4. Now again, everything, this looks like a huge amount of work, and it is essentially, but ultimately it comes back to, can we just remember how to lay this out effectively? I've spotted that it's a long multiplication, so I'm going to need these spaces, these bars to help me lay it out. I'm going to need my decimals in here, and so on. I'm going to need my place holding 0. So for me, there's a lot of work to do here to get 1 mark. And that's why we need to spot which ones are the questions that we need to do this for. So this is a good example. So if we just dive straight into this one, again, similar to the last one, the first thing is obviously seeing we've got a decimal, we're multiplying a decimal. So I'm thinking in my head, is it short or long? It's by 2 digits, so it's a long multiplication. So I've really got to be on my game to lay this out effectively. So we're going to have 2.4 multiplied by 23. Okay. I'm then going to put in my decimals because I know I'm going to have 2 rows of answers. And then I'm going to have my final answer here after this addition. You may want, if you're ahead of the game, which I am, hopefully, I'm putting my placeholder 0 in already. So now my setup is complete. Okay, like being ready for a game of football, having your shin pads, your socks, your Under Armour, your boots, your drink, everything that you need is set up so that you can essentially play the game. And that should be easy now because all we're going to do is 3 times 4 and 3 times 2 in this row. And then we're going to do 2 times 4 and 2 times 2 in this row and then add them together. So again, when we look at it that way, the multiplications are actually really, really simple. So let's go ahead and do them. 3 times 4 is 12. So we put the 2 in, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6. Add the 1 is 7. Very simple. So we've got 7.2. We're then going to do 2.4 in this row. So 2 times 4 is 8. And then we're going to do 2 times 2, which is 4. So very, very simple. We can't really go wrong with these. And at that point, we're going to do an addition. So we're going to do 2 add 0, 7 add 8, and then 4 is on its own unless we need to carry. So 2 add 0 is 2, 7 add 8 is 15, carry the 1, and then 4 add 1 is 5. Okay, so we end up with 55.2. And again, the little common sense check is 23 times 2 in our head as the whole numbers would be 46. So we're sort of in the right area in terms of tens numbers. 23 times 0.4 is nearly a half, isn't it? So that would be around 11. So add that to that. We would be around 55 anyway. So that's really, really straightforward. And that gets us to the answer really quickly. So these are the first couple of examples of SATs questions. So let's have a little bit of a go at them. I'm just going to get, if you want to pause it and have a go. But essentially, let's get straight into this one. So we've got, lay the first number out. So we've got 0.7, 0.7, and I'm multiplying by 26. Very simple. So I'm then going straight into putting my decimals in, and I've spotted that I'm multiplying by a 2-digit number. So in this second row, I need my placeholder 0. Very simple. Then I can get into the calculations. I'm going to do 7 times 6 and 7 times 0 across here. And then I'm going to do 2 times 7 and 2 times 0 across here, and then add them together. So again, I'll use a slightly different color. So 7 times 6 is 42. So put the 2 in, carry the 4. Then I'm going to do 6 times 0, which is nothing. Add 4 is 4. So great, we've got that there. Now I'm going to do 2 times 7 and 2 times 0. So very straightforward. 2 times 7 is 14. Carry the 1. 2 times 0 is nothing. So that's 1. So again, we end up in a very, very similar situation. Very simple addition. So that's 2, that's 8, and that's 1. So again, the final thing that we need to do is make sure that we transfer the answer into the box and make it really clear, 18.2. So again, that would be very straightforward, and we've probably got that mark quite quickly. So again, with this next question, 3.9 times 30. Now, there probably is a shorter way of doing this in terms of this is very close to 4 as a whole number. 4 times 30 would be 120. So the answer is going to be very, very close to that. But for lots of people that aren't as confident, sometimes the really quick way is just to drop into the strategy. So we've got 3.9 times 30. So very simple, 3.9 times 30. Put our placeholder zeros in. I'm going at a little bit of speed on this one. Placeholder 0, just to show how quickly we can do it. 0 times 9 is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. 3 times 9 is 27, carry the 2. 3 times 3 is 9, add the 2 is 11. So that's going to carry. Good. So I can add these together. We've got 0 add 0 is 0, 0 add 7 is 7, 0 add 1 is 1, 0 add 1 is 1. So our answer is 117. So very, very simple and a very straightforward way to carry out this calculation. And again, if we wanted to just think about this as a short method, if we look back here, knowing that 0.1 is missing here, so if we have 30 lots of 0.1, then that would be 3, essentially. And then if we knew that to make that up to 4, we could do 4 times 30 is 120, and take away the 3, which would give us 117. But that would all be based on the proprietary knowledge that you understand that to make this to a whole number and have 30 lots of it, you'd have 30 lots of 0.1, 0.1, and that would make 3, and then you could subtract that. For some people, it's much easier to just think, oops, I didn't want to do that. It's much easier to just think, I'll just drop straight into this strategy, which I can be confident and I've practiced with, and I will get the mark. So again, we'll run through this one quite quickly. Again, we should be in that mode of spotting. So 0.4 times 37. So it's a long multiplication. So we're going to need to drop into that mindset. So again, 0, I'm going to change the color, 0.4, take away 37. I'm going to then work on organizing my answer areas. And then I know that it's a long multiplication because I'm multiplying by 2 digits. So I'm putting in that placeholder 0 in the second row. And then I can get into it. I'm going to do 7 times 4, 7 times 0, 3 times 4, 3 times 0. So 7 times 4 is 28. Carry the 2. 7 times 0 is 0. Add the 2 is 2. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 0 is 0. Add the 1. So again, very simple. And then we can add them up. 8 add 0 is 8. 2 add 2 is... Oh, that's not quite recorded. There we go. Is 8. That's 4. And then we've got the 1. So we've got 14.8. Very, very simple. Very effective. Another thing that you might be noticing here with these numbers is that the questions are generally giving us problems to deal with quite low numbers, so 3s and 2s and 1s and 2s. So although you're going to have to do a long multiplication, the numbers that you're actually working with are relatively small. So there's a little bit of fairness in there. So we've got 3.2 multiplied by 12. There's my setup, and I can work from there. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. So we've worked through that really easily. 4 add 0 is 4. 6 add 2 is 8. 3 add nothing is 3. So I'm very quickly at 38.4, and that's how I get that mark really quickly. The other way essentially to do that, you could look at this one and do quite simply a partition and jot. So in my head, I'd be looking at this problem and thinking, well, I can do 12 times 3, and I can do 12 times 0.2. And that's if you're confident enough to do 12 times 0.2. So again, 12 times 3 is 36. 12 times 0.2 is going to be 2.4. And we can sort of help ourselves get to there. If you're not sure on those, is to think, well, I know 12 times 2 is 24, so 12 times 0.2 must be 2.4 because it's 10 times smaller. Then you could add those two together, and that would give you the same answer. Now, at the start, I talked about some questions that can potentially be trick questions. Now, this is a classic one in SATs that crops up. It's quite far into the test, question 23. And if you've been working on a written strategy like we have, you might automatically think I want to drop into a long multiplication. But if we're multiplying by 0.5, all we're essentially doing is halving. So this question is very simple. All it's asking is what is half of 28? So I would hope again, we don't need to drop into a division problem or anything like that. The answer, half of 28, is 14. There's nothing in here that's trying to trick you. It's basically asking if you've got an understanding of what's happening here. You could go into lane, and if you really didn't know what half of 28 was, there's no problem. You could use up a minute laying out the strategy that we'd worked out, but you would just get to 20. You would just get to 14 because essentially 0.5 is a half, and if we multiply by a half, then essentially we're just halving this number. So half of 28 is 14, and that's one to look out for. Another question style to look out for, I've touched on this in this video, but it's one of the previous videos, which is about multiplying and dividing by 10, 100, and 1,000, is that really we don't want to get drawn into a long strategy with this question. So it's 25.34 times 10. Essentially, this is just dropping into our old strategy of writing the question out, 25.34, decimal below, so we've created place value of ones, tens, hundreds, and so on. And because we're multiplying by 10, we know that everything in this layout is going to move one column to the left. So it's going to be 200. If we know that 10 times 25 is 250, this is going to be in the 250 area. So again, all these digits are just going to move along one column. So the 2 is going to end up in here, and everything else is just going to follow behind. So really, that is a very simple one to do, and we don't need to fall into a much larger written method like we've been doing. So this is another one to look out for, is that when we multiply by 10 or 100 or 1,000, that's not really a decimal multiplication question. It's multiplying by 10, 100, or 1,000, and we know from mastering this earlier is that that's just moving the digits one column, two column, or three columns to the left or the right, because they're getting 10, 100, or 1,000 times larger. So we got to look out for those, because there's no reason to be doing a written strategy when we can just use our own knowledge and skills to solve it quite quickly. So to finish this session, we've got some different questions for you to have a go at. There's not too many this week. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 12 in total. These ones are the shorter strategy. So again, it's multiplying by that single digit number, so we can set it out. And there's no reason for the placeholder zeros, because we're just multiplying by a single digit. These ones are the longer strategies, because each of them are multiplying by a 2-digit number. So we'll need to do the larger layout with the 2 bars, and then the addition to finish with, and the placeholder 0. So these are really going to put us in a good position for being able to master decimal multiplication. And there are, in the SATs questions, there do tend to be quite a few of these. But as I said before, we must look out for those multiplying by 0.5s, and we must look out for multiplying by 10, 100, and 1,000, because they're not really what this strategy wants us to do. We can do those in our heads.
So that is decimal multiplication covered. Now, hopefully from that video, you've understood the importance of laying out our decimals and just the general structure of the question, in terms of how we structure our decimal question, the number we're multiplying by, and then we structure the answer below. So it is, as I said in the first part, a challenging process, but as long as you've practiced how to do this, and you go through a number of examples and you work out exactly how you're going to lay this out and you're confident, then ultimately it's very, very quick. As you can see in my examples, because I know exactly how I want to lay it out, moving through the questions is really simple, and it is really easy to get those marks once you know what you're doing. And again, with these decimal multiplication questions, the numbers that we tend to be working with are smaller. So they're 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s maybe, as opposed to a long multiplication where the questions do tend to involve those larger numbers of 6, 7, 8, 9, which just make it harder to do. So as I said in the first part, if you want to dive into that a little bit more and need some support, these strategies are fully outlined within this book, so get your hands on a copy of that. And really importantly, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. These should be around in links somewhere below. and make sure that you like the videos and leave some comments. I'd love to have a few more comments and give a few more shout outs. And I hope, or I know from some of the comments, that these videos are making a real difference. So that's decimal multiplication. Next week's video is going to be about short division. So definitely subscribe so you get notifications about that. And well done for tuning in again this week and getting stuck in and prepared for your SATs.